Hello everybody, and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls build video. This is a roleplay build, and I kind of have to give you a little history on the character before I go into the build itself. So I'm going to kind of rush through the build when I get to it, just because it's just that. It's a roleplay build. It's not a build made for in-game. Not necessarily. It can be used as an in-game build, just with some minor adjustments to skills and stuff, but that's up to you. So, a brief history on this character. This character's name is Sislar. He is an Argonian from Shadowfen Swamp. He was born there, but he did not know where he originated until later in his life, when he was found out that the slavers who had captured him in Shadowfen. He never made his way back there until he was an adult, and he never found out who his family was, even after he returned. He wasn't really welcomed because of the fact that he was a slave, and he has a marking, a brand of a slave, and so he wasn't really welcomed back into the Hist, any of the Hist there, and so he kind of just went and did his own thing. He also has some pirate background, he has some bandit background, but his main background came later in his life when he joined the Dark Brotherhood and became a master assassin for the Dark Brotherhood. And that's what he is today, is a master assassin, and that's what the build is called, the Master Assassin. This build is made strictly and mainly for the purpose of playing the game's content outside of the end game. This character is mainly made for playing quests, for playing delves and dungeons. To let you guys know, I do have a guide coming out next week for things called Adventure Nights. It's basically a guide to how to set up your own kind of story adventures for you and your friends to play, to kind of just be that. Like, you know, you go to a tavern, you're hanging out, and next thing you know, you might be approached by somebody, and you have one person do the storytelling. And I'll get into that at the guide, but that's what this character is really made for, is that kind of play. To just be somebody to play the game with and have fun with. It's just that. So that's his background, a little bit of it. There's more to the story than that. I'm not going to go through the whole thing about his slave time, when he was a slave, to where he was freed by bandits, and those bandits wind up taking him in and training him in the sword play and bow and all that kind of stuff, because he excelled at those things. But we'll leave it at that. So let's get right into it. I am going to cover this like a normal build, though. I'm going to go over all the skills, the champion points, the reason why I have the skill set up that way, and everything like that. But like I said, this is pretty much just strictly a role-playing build. That means you role-play this character. You don't have to play this exact character. You can make the character how you want with any race and everything, and you can play him how you want. It's just the build is there as a guide. That's it. So Sislar is an Argonian Nightblade. He was, like you said, trained in the arts of assassination by the Dark Brotherhood and has stuck by the Dark Brotherhood's code ever since. He follows that code to a T. He is nothing but a hired assassin. So going over the stats here, you can see I put 64 points into stamina. That's how I got the high stamina pool. I do have a 17k health with a 31k stamina, 3100 weapon damage, 55% crit. I don't need much more than that to pull off what I need for the build to work. I have pretty low resistances, but that's okay. I do have a monster set that gives me a lot more, and we'll get to that in a second. We have good spell and physical penetration because we are using a sharpened weapon on one of our offhand, so we do get some extra penetration in there. We have good outside stamina recovery and good outside health recovery to a degree. It's mainly for that purpose, to have that extra resource control of the character, especially when you're playing through content. You want to still be able to have control over your character's recovery. We do have an 1100 stamina recovery also because of the build and its setup. So going down here, we have the Warrior Mundus Stone. You don't have to use the Warrior. If you want to use the Thief, you can use the Thief. If you want to use the Shadow, you can use the Shadow. It works with all three. I just prefer the Warrior because I have been playing a lot of dungeons lately on normal mode to get my Undaunted passive. Moving on, We have Major Savagery from Expert Hunter. We do run Expert Hunter on both bars. Just to let you guys know, this is a roleplay character, so it's not made like an in-game character, but if you want to make some adjustments to make it in-game, I'll explain how you can do that and how you can remove certain skills to replace with other skills to make it more of an in-game build, if you want to. Next up, we have the dual stat food, max health, max stamina. It's the best for the build, period. Hands down. You can't get much better than this, so I'm going to go ahead and eat some more food. So let's go ahead and get in here and take a look at the gear. On the gear, it's going to be a little different than what most people are accustomed to. As you can see, I do have Krogs here, and that's for when I run dungeons, but if I'm role-playing the character, I run Bloodspawn. The reason I run Bloodspawn is because of the stamina recovery, and also, when you take damage, you have the 6% chance to generate more ultimate, so you can fire more ultimates off. And also, you have that chance of getting those extra resistances. I call it his stone scale gear because it makes his skin stone, and gives him like a stone armor thing. It's kind of in his character's story. The reason why he does, like, he gets that is because of his it's something to do with his family's heritage, that they were of this race, of this one Argonian clan called the Stoneskins, and basically they can produce a stone shell around their skin to protect them from harmful damage or elements when it's called for. The monster set's just there for the purpose to give me that. Otherwise, it's part of the roleplay of the character. Moving on, we are running 5 pieces. Night Mother's Gaze. This gives us really good weapon crit, good weapon damage to a degree, and then extra when you deal critical damage, you reduce the enemy's physical resistance by 2,490 for 6 seconds. This plays into that whole assassin thing. You want to kill things fast. If you don't get the Blade of Woe to work, if you're working on becoming an assassin, you don't have Blade of Woe yet, you have that gear there to cover that. Next up, we are running Night Mother's Embrace as the other set. All the gear is Divines, if you can get it. My monster set is heavy and light, by the way, so I can get the 5-1-1 setup for in-game purposes. The same thing goes over here. As you look, I have light and I have a heavy shoulder. I don't have a heavy helm, so I just kind of went with this because it works. Neither of these are Divines either yet because I haven't farmed them out. But I'm fine with that. I can live with it. So, but if you see, Night Mother's Embrace and Night Mother's Gaze kind of play off each other really well because one's made for critical damage, the other one's made for increased damage, but also for the stealthiness in your character because it reduces your cost of sneak, and it also reduces the detection radius of your sneaking by 2 meters. So you get a really good benefit from this, and I'll show you why here in a minute. We are running Night Mother's Embrace Jewelry. As you can see, all 3 pieces have weapon damage on them just to give us that greater damage in case we need to kill an enemy without getting the Blade of Woe on them. Now, if you guys don't know, Blade of Woe works on non-player characters, not only in towns, but also in dungeons and delves. And it's kind of fun when you can pull it off. Like, you sneak up behind an enemy and you use the Blade of Woe. It's really cool. So, I like using it a lot. So the Night Mother's Embrace really plays on that as well. Moving on to the weapons down here, we have a sharpened Night Mother's Dagger, Night Mother's Gaze Dagger. This gives us the crit and that kind of stuff, but mainly we want that penetration. I do have increased weapon damage on here because, like I said, I have been playing a lot of dungeons, not only on normal but also on vet mode with this build. So on to the next one over here, we have the Sword of the Night Mother. Also Night Mother's Gaze, and it's Nirnhone for the increased weapon damage. I do Minimax a lot, even though I don't play this character as a truly Minimaxed in-game character. I do Minimax my build still, and this kind of plays on that. So the Nirnhone really works well with this build, and that poison glyph on there helps a lot because you get that extra damage every 5 seconds, so it does improve your DPS. Moving on to the back bar, we have a sharpened bow. You could go with other bows if you wanted to. Here, you could go with Nirnhone, you can go with Infused, you can go with whatever. I prefer Sharpen because of the extra penetration, because we don't get the crit chance thing from the Night Mothers on the back bar. Because when we switch weapons, if you watch, we don't get it. So that Sharpened effect is the same as having that critical damage from that. So it's kind of the trade-off that you get. Alright. And on this one, you want a poison damage glyph as well, because we are an assassin. So it just plays on. I do use poisons from time to time as well when I get them. I do use poisons, and sometimes I buy poisons from like the guild traders, so that way I can be more, you know, like an assassin kind of character. So works out really well. Both these gear sets work very well together, and of course Bloodspawn really plays in it. But like I said, if I'm doing dungeons, I do run Krogs for the extra penetration and the extra damage, just so I have it. The higher penetration I get, the more damage I get. So really, really good here. Now let's go over the skills in that. So onto the skills, we have on the main bar, we have Ambush. This is just a leap to get to the opponent really fast, especially after you use your bow skills. You can fire off, you know, your poison injection, that kind of stuff. Leap in, do your damage, get out kind of thing. Because this build is made for hit and run. It's made to get in, do damage, like burst damage, and then get out. You don't want to focus on doing damage, like consistent damage. It's more of a burst build. So it's kind of, you have to manage that resource, that factor in there. So so Ambush plays into it, and it also grants you Empower on your next ability, which your next ability should be Blood-Crazed. So Blood-Crazed is a really good damage ability. It does decent damage up front, but it does really good bleed damage over time. As you can see, 10,690 over 9 seconds, and it is boosted because of other things. We do get 20% more weapon damage. You get a good heal from it as well, which is really great. So just keep that in mind. Now, the next ability we have is Killer's Blade. This is basically for you to do extra damage against enemies when you get them below 25% health, and it makes it a lot easier to kill them. Really great. And if you guys notice, I only use assassin abilities on both bars, and there's a reason why I use assassin abilities on both bars, and it's for the greater DPS purpose. Moving on to the next one, we have Shrouded Dagger. Now, I do switch this out with another ability in the Siphon Tree. I'll get to that in a minute. But I use this one mainly because it hits multiple targets, and it's a really good damage dealing ability. As you can see, it hits 2 other targets, and the second target takes 8,000, and then the third target will take 10,000. So it bounces between 3 targets. It does really good damage though. And it also gives you Major Brutality, increasing your weapon damage by 20%. So it can be put into a rotation. Next up, we have Evil Hunter. Evil Hunter gives us Major Savagery, which increases our weapon critical by 2,190. This just keeps us at a higher crit rate, so that way we get more consistent crits. Moving on to the next one, we do have Lacerate. And Lacerate is here for what it says. Slash enemies in front of you, dealing a lot of damage. And it's a low-cost ultimate, almost as low as Dawnbreaker, but it has a greater reach than Dawnbreaker. If you guys don't know what Dawnbreaker is, I need to go down to the Fighters Guild. Dawnbreaker is a Fighters Guild ability. As you see, it has a 10-meter radius only in a direct line in front of it. That means it shoots out 10 meters in front of it. The Lacerate hits multiple enemies in like a conal effect in front of you. It's 7 meters wide by 8 meters long, so it hits greater amount of enemies and does a lot more damage. Now, this is supposed to do a 10-meter radius around you. It doesn't really do a 10-meter radius around you. It only hits enemies in front of you, and it only hits them in a straight line. It doesn't hit them off to the side. If they're off to the side by a little bit, it's more focused on like getting the enemies to line up in front of you. It's a really great ability, though. Dawnbreaker is. I will switch out to this later on, but for now, Lacerate works amazingly well. All right, moving on to the back bar. We are using Reaper's Mark as our #1 ability here. This is a great way to reduce the enemy's physical and spell resistance. And on top of that, if the enemy dies within the time frame, the 20 seconds, you heal yourself for 63% of your max health, and you gain Major Berserk for 25 seconds. So usually I apply this to one target to get the Major Berserk, then reapply it to the next target. So that way I can keep Major Berserk up consistently. So next up we have Poison Injection. Poison Injection is basically for the purpose of being an assassin, that extra poison damage kind of thing. But it's really good, especially when you're roaming the world and you want to do some hunting, or you want to do some like delves or something, or you're doing some public dungeons or even regular dungeons. This is a great ability. So The main reason why, like I said, it fits into the whole assassin thing. Next up is Endless Hail, another ability that I like to use. It's the only AoE we have, really, besides Lacerate, so it's kind of like essential. Like, you want to use this kind of thing, so you get that AoE effect. So, really good damage overall. So, moving on to the next ability, we have Relentless Focus. Now, this one is a fantastic ability. You want to keep this up all the time, pretty much, whenever you're doing anything, even just playing basic game content, for the minor Berserk and the minor Endurance. You want that 8% damage done, and you want that 20%, or that 10% stam recovery. It also has a really, really good damage if you do 5 light attacks consecutively. Now, if you guys don't know anything about the bow has a really unique thing to it. So when you're using a bow, you have like Ranger, you have accuracy, but you also have long shot, but then you have Hawkeye. Dealing damage with a light or heavy attack increases the damage of your bow abilities by 5% for 5 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. If you can do 5 consecutive light attacks and fire poison ejection, and then do this right afterwards, you get a lot of damage out of that hit, because you get that greater damage. I mainly use that combination on bosses because I like to get that extra damage out of that. So I do 5 consecutive light attacks, hit poison injection, then I hit them with that Relentless Focus or Assassin's Scourge, allowing you to fire a single shot from your spectral bow at an enemy, dealing 14,000 damage, disease damage. And that's just crazy, and it can crit up to even more. Next up, we have Evil Hunter, and then of course the last ability here is Rapid Fire. Now, I am going to morph this into the poison one. I just took this recently because I changed it out with the ultimate I was using. So the ultimate I was using on the back bar was from the Assassination line, and that was incapacitating strikes. This is a really powerful ability, really low cost ultimate, and the fact that it gives you Major Defile, it also gives you this increased damage by 20% against enemies for 6 seconds. That's not one hit, that's consecutive hits over 6 seconds. Really, really helps a lot with the damage from this build, but at the same time, I like the idea of having that rapid fire from the bow, so I still like this ability. The ability that I usually switch this one out for, Shrouded Daggers, if I don't want to run Shrouded Daggers, I want another AoE, is Power Extraction. Mainly because it does an AoE damage to the enemies, and it gives me Major Brutality. So, really cheap cost stamina ability, kind of cheap, not super cheap, but cheap enough that you don't notice it. And you just use it once to AoE the enemies, and then you have your Endless Hail going, so you Endless Hail, you ambush, then Power Extraction, then do your other abilities. It's not necessarily a build that you play with a rotation if you don't want to. You can just kind of play it like situational, blocking, dodge rolling, that kind of thing, because it is a roleplay build. It's not one that's made for this rotation type setup. It's made for just a fun play, and that's why it's set up the way it is. So moving on to the champion points. With all builds, again, I do Minimax, so I did Minimax this. I have 56 in Ironclad. This reduces damage taken against damage attacks, or direct damage attacks, by 20%. 56 is a nice spot to be, but you could go higher if you wanted to, but I find this to be better because I can put more points elsewhere, and it kind of evens out. So, moving on over here, we have 56 into Thick Skin. This reduces their damage taken from damage over time by 20%. We have 43 into Hardy. This reduces damage from physical, poison, and disease damage by 10%. Basically, overall physical damage type stuff, like anything stamina based. On the next one, Elemental Defender, this is anything magic damage. Flame, Frost, Shock, magic damage itself, reduced damage by 10%. These do stack with Thick Skin and with the Ironclad, so just letting you know. Moving on over here, we have 16 into Expert Defender. This reduces damage taken by from light and heavy attacks by 10%. I'll explain this real quick. Most enemies, 75% of their attacks are light and heavy attacks. This includes world bosses, enemies of all kinds mostly do light and heavy attacks. The rest of the time, they do other abilities. So having that greater reduced damage from light and heavy attacks makes it greater for you for survivable reasons. Greater damage reduction. All right, moving on to quick recovery. We have this, which increases our healing by 4.48%. Really, it's just 4%. And being an Argonian, we get 8% or 5% healing received and 5% outgoing healing. So that 5% healing received with that other 4% is 9%. So it just gives us greater healing received to keep our survivability up while we're playing through, you know, maybe a public dungeon or a delve or even fighting against world bosses with other players. Just having that greater recovery rate really does help. So moving on over here, 23 in the Warlord. This reduces our cost to break free by 10%. Now, a lot of people ask me why I waste points in things like Warlord, Sprinter, different things like that. The main reason why is because I don't like to waste my resources by sprinting or breaking free. I like to get the greater reduced cost, so it saves me resources. And saving your resources is what the game's about. It's about management of your resources, and this allows for that kind of management because you're not wasting that management or those resources to do certain things. You're actually getting greater benefit out of them. So that's why I do it. So this reduces the cost of break free by 10%. If you guys know what break free is, it's basically when you get stunned or you get knocked off balance or something, it gives you the way to break free by hitting block and pressing your attack button. So, all right. Next, we have 35 in the Sprinter. This reduces our sprint cost by 20%. This plays with the passive in the medium armor line that increases your sprint speed by 15% for wearing 5 pieces of medium. Having that greater reduced cost and that greater speed really kind of plays hand in hand. Also with the bow, when you dodge roll and you get that extra boost of speed, it plays in that as well. So it just allows you greater maneuverability to get away from guards if you get seen killing somebody or something like that, or you wind up getting a bounty on you. You want to get to that, refuge, outlaw refuge. You can get there because you can dodge roll with the bow thing. The bow passive that allows you to sprint faster. That sprint increase from your medium armor, and then that with the reduced sprint cost saves you a lot of exertion of your character, so you can get there without wasting or burning through your stamina faster. All right, 43 in the Mooncalf. This increases our stamina recovery by 15%. We are a Nightblade, so we get 15%. This is a 25% increase to our stamina recovery. Now, if you guys don't know, Bloodspawn and the other set that I run, Night Mother's Embrace, both give stamina recovery, and that stamina recovery is boosted again by 20% or 25%. So that's why I have it. We have Tenacity, 43 points. A lot of people say this is a waste, but honestly, I don't see it as a waste when you have a 40% with this 10%. We have 40% total, so you get 40% stamina recovery, and the higher your stamina recovery is, the more stamina you get back on your heavy attacks. So that's why I have the higher stamina recovery, is for that greater return on the heavy attacks. Now, if I'm running Krogs, I don't have as high as stamina recovery, so this greater stamina recovery from this still plays in that really well, and it helps me manage my resources a lot better. Moving on to the next one, we have 16 into Shade. This reduces the cost of Sneak by 10%. This really allows us to get around in the environments and stuff because we do sneak a lot, but we don't want to dump a bunch of points into here because the more points we put in here, the more we waste them for other things that we could use that are more beneficial. Just saying. Next up, we have 56 in the Tumbling. This reduces our dodge roll cost by 20%. This does stack with the medium armor passive, which is I have 20% from there and 20% from here, making it 40%. So if I dodge roll, if you watch, if I dodge roll, I don't use hardly any stamina whatsoever, and so it's just a way to, like I said, save resources. And that's what the game's all about, is managing resources anyways. And that allows me to manage resources a lot better. So going back into the champion points, I did have 14 or some points left over, so I put it in a Shadow Ward because I do block attacks too. And having that greater resource management again allows me to save resources even if I have to block. Because I do solo play this character a lot more than I do group play. But if I do group play, I still play them as a Master Assassin. So thief assassin, more or less. Alright, we're going to skip this tree because we aren't using it. Into the next tree, we are using this. We have 16 into physical weapon expert. This increases the damage of our light and heavy attacks with two-handed, one-handed sword and shield. One-handed and shield, and dual wield and bow by 10%. This is a great passive because we do do a lot of light and heavy attacks in our abilities just to get some extra damage in there. So that 10% increase is really good, especially when it stacks with this 20% from direct damage done, because all light and heavy attacks are considered direct damage. So that's a 30% increase in our damage. Really plays well with this build. On top of that, we also get retaliation, that whenever we block a heavy attack from an enemy, we get our next light attack used within 7 seconds, deals 30% more damage. And this goes up a lot. So that 30% stacks with that other 30%, making it 60%. But we also get some other passives in the next tree, which boost it even more, which I want to talk about real quick. So we also get Opportunist, that whenever you interrupt an attack of an enemy, your next physical damage ability used within 7 seconds is 15% light heavy attacks or physical damage. And when you do block a heavy attack, you do interrupt that attack and set them off balance. So that's another 15% added to that 30%, making that a greater number. On top of that, when you do set an enemy off balance, you get another 10%. So that's another 25% between the two added to your damage, making the total damage from this being 60% to being 85%. That's an 85% increase in damage from one light attack. And if that light attack happens to crit, it is also boosted by 20% because we put 56 points into precise strikes, which means that light attack now, if it crits, has a 70% increase in damage on top of that 85%. So that 85% increase, along with the 10% here, by the way, is 95% increase. So that's almost 100% increase in damage already. Now you take that and you increase it by another 70%. That means you take that total number that you just got and increase it by 70%. And if it's like a 14,000 hit light attack, that 14,000, or say, sorry, 7,000 light attack, because of all those bonuses, that 7,000 now becomes 14 or 70% more. And it could go up to as high as 14K. Even though it's not 100%, I know. I'm just saying that I've seen it go that high where it's almost 100% more. And it's just crazy for a light attack. So we have 46 in the Mighty. This gives us a 10% increase in our physical, poison, and disease damage. I do want to take this up a little bit more, so that's why I'm dumping, like from here on, the next amount of points I get, I'm going to dump in here. My next 10 points from the next update is automatically going to go in here. As you guys can see, I'm already set to go to the next update cap when the next update comes out. I have 56 in the Thaumaturge, which increases my damage done with damage over time by 20%. Now remember, damage over time. Endless Hail is not a damage over time ability. It doesn't gain a bonus from this. Just to let you know. But Poison Injection, Blood-Crazed, both gain this benefit. So those are the reason why I use those abilities, is to gain that 20% more. And that also does stack with this, so that's 30% more damage that you get from those damage over time ability. And then if you crit, you get 70% more damage from those damage over time abilities. So that's kind of the nice benefit of this build, is this build does work in both normal and vet dungeons, but not, you know, like to a good degree, but you have to play smart with it, and you have to run Krogs. If you don't run Krogs and you're still running the Bloodspawn, that's fine. You just have this chance of proccing more ultimate and this really high resistance. And that's pretty much it. I mean, a roleplay build is no different than any other build that you might play. It's just that you created the character based on what you like to play, more on like how you want to play. And the Master Assassin build is pretty much that. It's a Master Assassin build made for play how you want kind of sense, but it's a roleplay build too. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it for the build, guys. I hope that you guys like it, and if you do, I'd greatly appreciate a like, push of the like button. You can do that. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can hit the subscribe button. Other than that, all I really have to say is thanks for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy will see y'all later. Bye.